レクイエム・フォー・ドリームという映画をご存知ですか？ダーレン・アロノフスキーっていう監督が撮ったパーフェクト・ブルーを実写にしたいって言い出した人なんですよ、この人。どうやらお気に入りらしいと。でレクイエム・フォー・ドリームで彼が来日した時に会ってるんです。対談しようと。でその前に当然そのレクイエム・フォー・ドリームを見たんですけど、カットまんまアングルも構図も同じで、
上からのと、この水の中の、
レクイエム・フォー・ドリーム、使われてるんですけど、本人に会って確認したらオマージュだオマージュですよ、私に、この私に。
In the process of researching for this essay, I couldn't help but draw subconscious parallels between Damien Hirst and Darren Aronofsky and their respective inspirations, Francis Bacon and Satoshi Kon. While I personally have never engaged with Aronofsky's work, I trust the word of the man who feels artistically cheated. Satoshi Kon is no stranger to homage himself. In the same interview, he admits that he too wears his influences on his sleeve. Millennium Actress and Paprika contain many a montage of their protagonists dashing through animated recreations of existing films, after all, and Tokyo Godfathers was even inspired by the premise of 1948's Three Godfathers. Kon's adoration for the medium is made apparent through his continuous tributes to it. I feel this sentiment is true of all artists. In my own written work, I too have invoked the imagery of my inspirations, Kon absolutely included. I've studied his editing style and made the effort to incorporate such techniques as match cuts into the videos I create. I should be over the moon to see my favorite director referenced explicitly in Aronofsky's film, and yet I too feel cheated. In one of my stories, I wrote a scene with this exact cut in mind, wherein a character is submerged underwater in a massive snow globe and screams. Am I no better than Aronofsky, another self-proclaimed fan of Satoshi Kon? The distinction here is medium and context. I cannot truly emulate Kon via written word alone, whereas Aronofsky, a filmmaker, may as well have been handed Kon's original storyboard for the scene. Everything from the timing to the framing of the shots lines up exactly with Kon's original piece. In this very interview, Kon also notes other imagery from Perfect Blue, which Aronofsky borrows in Requiem for a Dream, albeit less explicitly. This all goes without mentioning Black Swan, a film whose entire premise arguably derives from Perfect Blue, and shamelessly replicates its thematic and visual elements. Given that Aronofsky showed interest in adapting Kon's film into live action, it comes as no surprise that his own work would serve to rip it off time and again. As stated before, Satoshi Kon pays homage to countless films in his own works, especially those centered around the medium of film itself, such as Millennium Actress and Paprika. What distinguishes Kon from Aronofsky, however, is that these homages exist as a backdrop, and the conglomeration of these influences serves as a loving commentary on the evolution and diversity of the medium. Chiyoko races through countless films as she reminisces upon her past as an actress, and her memories on set bleed into those of real life. Paprika similarly leaps across such recreations as she navigates the dreams of a man who used to adore films before a tragedy transformed his love into fear. The audience is meant to read these references as such. While the aforementioned Tokyo Godfathers borrows its basic premise from Three Godfathers, its setting and characters are wholly distinct, taking place in Tokyo as opposed to the sprawling deserts of Arizona, serving as a heartfelt commentary on the reality of homelessness in the city, while repeatedly gracing its protagonists with serendipitous coincidences which stem from the choices that they make along the way. Aronofsky plagiarizes, and Kon pays homage. This is an essay about Damien Hirst. Corporations pervert art and beget monsters. Amanda the Adventurer and Don't Feed the Muse are stories haunted by such creations of corporate greed. These entities torment and distortedly mirror the main characters, as their faceless puppeteers observe and orchestrate the carnage from afar. Sam Colton is a creator of the public access television program Amanda the Adventurer, which stars his adopted daughter Rebecca and serves as the centerpiece for the titular indie game. What starts as a wholesome tale of a struggling artist finding inspiration through the sunny outlook of his child and using his craft to share that worldview with the rest of his hometown is slowly corrupted following the introduction of Hamlin? I know it's a play on the Pied Piper town, but I still don't know how to say it. Hamlin, for lack of a better pronunciation, is a shady corporation that approaches Sam with hopes of syndicating his show nationally. What seems like a golden opportunity for a small production to make it big soon devolves into a horror story, as Hamlin's true sinister nature comes to light behind closed doors. One day, Sam disappears, no doubt by the hands of the corporation, leaving Rebecca in their care. The gang follows Riley Park as they rediscover the animated version of the show, wherein Rebecca's soul is trapped. Through interacting with their aunt's old tapes, they find a grotesque distortion of Sam's creation, strewn with explicit imagery of death in the form of animal corpses, a world trapped in a state of perpetual rot, bereft of the love of its creator. In his web series, Don't Feed the Muse, Alex Bale portrays a fictional version of himself, a nigh unknown aspiring filmmaker who discovers a ravenous creature living in his garage. This entity calls itself his Muse, and supplies him with intricate theories revolving around the show SpongeBob SquarePants in exchange for raw meat. The videos Alex creates with his Muse's theories amass millions of views, while his original films remain unnoticed. However, Alex's newfound appetite for consistent validation on his work, even if the work receiving the validation arguably isn't his own, enables the Muse to manipulate him into feeding it more than mere store-bought meat. When Alex is at his lowest, he resorts to purchasing a live animal, a cat he names Gary, to sate his Muse's hunger. He goes so far as to bring Gary into his house, before informing the monster that he can't go through with the exchange. However, it's too late. The Muse has already eaten Gary, and, having fully matured with Alex's help, takes the form of Alex himself and devours him too. In actuality, Alex's Muse is just one in a massive network of muses, all leeching off desperate artists, all stemming from a corporation called Happy Meat Farms, whose inhumane experiments on cows and other livestock enabled the infiltration of these monsters into the rest of the world. Like Hamlin, Happy Meat Farms preys upon small, passionate creators to further its own insidious plans, promising them exposure for their art, and sucking the life out of it and its creators in the process. Now you're probably wondering what any of this has to do with Damien Hirst, or even who the guy is. Well, Damien Hirst is an artist, his words not mine. He rose to fame through his natural history series, which features real preserved animals in glass vitrines of formaldehyde. These works aim to effectively jump scare their viewers by invoking literal images of death. And that's the whole problem. Hirst, the artist, doesn't require a corrupting corporate force. He is actively trying to create a monster. Again, his words, not mine! And like any corporation, he oft achieves this by deriving his inspiration from other artists, the aforementioned Francis Bacon among them, rendering his own work soulless and empty, much like the accursed Hamlin-produced adaptation of Amanda the Adventurer or the SpongeBob theories Alex's Muse continues to create when Alex himself is out of the picture. Hirst's egregious disregard for life in the name of profit echoes that of one unicorn CEO, a sorcerer who sought to capitalize on the unpaid labor of chaos spirits he imprisoned in iron cubes. His efforts to harness their power backfired tremendously, resulting in two of them escaping into the real world. The cubes delight in murdering everyone they come in contact with, and puppeting their corpses in song and dance numbers, which more often than not end in organ theft. Their attempts at art are more so a ploy to steal from and torment their favorite victim, Charlie, using his horn and kidney to adorn a snowman in one infamous instance. In her essay, Charlie the Unicorn, Capitalism as Apocalypse, Natalie Lynn posits several symbolic interpretations of the cubes, but I'd like to focus on this one.
The cubes represent capitalism distilled, even more so than Slug's labor scheme. The chaos spirits are the bigwig capitalists, powerful entities with no regard for the lives of those beneath them as they tear down the world for their own selfish fulfillment. They are the bosses who demand that you perform happiness for their benefit despite how hollow and dead you might feel on the inside. And of course, the blue and pink chaos spirits, the out-of-control capitalists who end out-of-control capitalists, would never have existed had the governments of Charlie's world cracked down on businesses like the OG Charlie the Unicorn.
Throughout the Charlie series, the cubes, possessing the respective bodies of a blue and pink unicorn, exhibit a reckless indifference to the world around them, putting on frivolous performances with the corpses that litter the land, all for the sake of disarming and scarring Charlie. Their work is not so different from Damien Hirst's, his natural history series existing primarily to accomplish that jump scare effect I mentioned before, to disquiet its viewers via its use of animal corpses. But is there anything deeper than that? Is there any other reason for these pieces to exist as something other than a distraction, a means to an end? For Blue and Pink to rob Charlie and for Damien Hirst to rob us and his countless influences? Lynn suggests that, for the cubes, this is a mode of catharsis. Imposing the cheerful facade unique to capitalist hell upon the entire world is their method of revenge after so many years of abuse under an evil sorcerer. As the richest living artist on the planet, with an estimated net worth of $700 million, Damien Hirst bears closer resemblance to the unicorn CEO whose own tunnel vision and constant torment of the cubes ultimately led to their takeover. There is no sense of catharsis in Damien Hirst's oeuvre, except his fear of death and being ignored, fears he continuously strives to counter by mass-producing work, hoping to ingrain his creations into the minds of his own audience. I mean, they are still technically his creations, right? Even though they're mostly plagiarized, at least it can be said that he made them, right? Right?
Oh, I meant his paintings.
I mean, Damien Hirst isn't some corporate superpower, he's just one guy after all.
Cause you don't get what I need. Just you watch as you will see. What are you gonna buy with your happiness? You should have listened to me. You said that my life is meaningful. What to make me laugh? Is that all you have? What are you gonna buy with your happiness? You should have listened to me.
Hirst operates under the conceit that the artist's main job is to conceive ideas, and it makes no real difference who executes those ideas. So long as the final work fulfills that initial vision, it should be credited first and foremost to the guy who came up with it, even if the art itself was not created by his own hand. I bet he'd really get off on the whole AI craze.
Huh.
Suffice it to say, Hirst reaps the benefits of others, taking credit for ideas he supposedly came up with on his own. To his credit, he sometimes partakes in the act of creation himself. It, looks a little like this.
Yeah.
A veritable one-man assembly line. The source of Hirst's art, Science Limited, is constantly likened to a factory or a machine. This analogy brings to mind the character Joey Drew, who ran his animation studio into financial ruin under the guise of chasing a dream that wasn't even his, as Henry Stein created the studio's main character, Bendy, who Drew would go on to pervert in the name of progress. Joey Drew, like Hirst, is a man of only ideas who leeches off his employees in his own attempts to cheat death. The titular ink machine of Bendy and the Ink Machine was conceived as a means to bring the studio's characters to life by sacrificing the bodies and souls of humans, but all it creates are monsters, and it's Henry and everyone else who end up paying for Joey's misdeeds.
All my favorite artists from the past. The way they move forwards is what interests me, and the way they stop being one thing, like the Beatles. The way they totally reinvented themselves and changed into something else.
Damien Hirst said that was a bad impression of him. When I read this quote this morning, I thought Alvin and the Chipmunks could totally kick your ass.
Hey, that looks like my boy.
In the 1960s, a man by the name of Ross Bagdasarian discovered Nightcore, and the world was never the same. He created Alvin, Simon, and Theodore, 3 singing chipmunks whose act he directed under the stage name David Seville. The band performed original songs as well as covers, and was a hit from the start. Their debut single, the Chipmunk song, Christmas Don't Be Late, was the first and only Christmas song to reach #1 on the charts, until it was dethroned by Mariah Carey 61 years later. There's this joke online about Carey defrosting annually to deliver the song to us each December, but Alvin and the Chipmunks breached containment a long time ago. When Ross Bagdasarian passed away, his son, Ross Bagdasarian Jr., sought to continue his legacy. On his first date with Janice Carmen, he brought her to his father's office and inquired if a proper resurrection of the franchise seemed possible. Because they were clearly soulmates, Janice saw this proposition as a call to action, and the pair spent the following years breathing new life into the Chipmunks. Janice even creating the Chipettes, their female counterparts. Ross and Janice voiced the characters themselves and still do to this day, while their own 20-something-year-old kids enthusiastically sustain the franchise alongside them. all the while. To this day, they speak of them with an almost religious zeal. This is their entire life, and they couldn't be happier. It's thanks to their efforts that every generation since Bagdasarian Sr. has grown up with some incarnation of the chipmunks. My grandparents, parents, myself, and the next generation all have a signature version tied to our childhood, for better or for worse. This messy, bizarre, imperfect endeavor is a labor of love at the end of the day, spanning several decades and spawning the very concept of virtual bands. The legacy of the Chipmunks is upheld by their creators and fans like Tariq Shakur Harris, who's made several in-depth videos about different facets of the franchise. The video you're watching right now would not exist without him.
The jump from the 60s to the 80s was when Alvin, Simon, Theodore, and Dave not only became well-rounded characters, they became a family. And there's something really profound in a man taking characters his father created and growing them beyond his wildest dreams. The franchise has had its ups and downs ever since, but their character has always remained true.
Every incarnation is different from the last. They actively embrace change in order to achieve immortality, whereas Damien Hirst denies death, denies deterioration and evolution alike. When his piece, The Physical Impossibility of Death in the Mind of Someone Living, deteriorated after the mixture of formaldehyde was tainted, Hirst had it replaced with a piece called Death Denied.
Ooh, okay. Denial.
Alvin and the Chipmunks have always reflected the era wherein their current incarnation presides, while Damien Hirst denies change altogether. For a guy who created an exhibit containing hundreds of live butterflies, Hirst has denied his work its own metamorphosis time and time again, and that which is static just reads as white noise against the backdrop of a changing world. In his 2019 essay, Why Shark Tale is a Cinematic Disaster, James Frillis states that Shark Tale, for all its flaws, holds more artistic merit than Shrek III, a film which he deems painfully safe and mediocre. He invokes Illumination's output to drive this comparison home, and I think this quote perfectly summates my feelings about Damien Hirst versus Alvin and the Chipmunks.
What's there to enjoy here? Nothing? Okay, then what's there to make fun of here? Oh, also nothing. It's just a safe corporate product with no personality whatsoever. Shark Tale is oozing with personality. Ugly, conceited, horribly dated personality. But that's something.
He satirically places a young clone of himself in a museum and titles the display, "Time is a Prison of Living Things."
Museum visitors nicknamed the body David.
What differentiates Time as a Prison of Living Things from The Physical Impossibility of Death in the Mind of Someone Living is the simple fact that David is alive. He decays in real time and his mortality resonates with museum goers. His death is mourned. People cannot empathize with the immortal, and Hearst's sharks, sheep, cows, and unicorns ring as empty mockeries of life. Cheap jump scares and nothing more. Life is about rot. It's about change. Art is inherently ephemeral like us. The fact it oft outlives its creators does not negate the fact that it too will die. It's almost like Damien Hirst wants to ordain what we make of his work. He wants that manufactured fear so badly, it's embarrassing. I do not feel fear when I look at natural history. Admittedly, I don't feel disgust or sadness either. It's the knowledge that these animals were real, once alive, that dissuades me from projecting myself, my emotions, upon their corpses. There's a palpable disconnect between me and his work, like the vitrines wherein he houses these creatures. I feel like I can see straight through Hirst's facade. He has nothing profound to convey, nothing to contribute to the world. He does not create out of passion, but necessity. Arguably, he doesn't create at all. Duchamp once said, "The artist performs only one part of the creative process. The onlooker completes it, and it is the onlooker who has the last word." When I look at the work of Damien Hirst, I find I have nothing to say.
Theodore, check this out. What's this? I invented it. A robot that can create art for me. Look. You just feed a picture in here, and then it makes art. Okay, it looks like I need to reel you back in some crazy clown.